if any of your listeners cared at all about politics in recent decades, they will have heard of this. The General Services Administration under prior leadership got in some hot water, literally and figuratively, because they had an $800,000 bill for a conference they were hosting in Las Vegas. It included such fun things as $30,000 for a pool party, them hiring a mind reader as entertainment for their staff, and them having one of their employees stay in a 2,400 square foot suite in that Las Vegas hotel. And yes, I did say 2,400 square feet. That is 5 times the size of the place that I live every single day. And so that is a very big place to spend a few days for a conference. And so Congress caught wind of this. And so they were very, very upset.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Hey everyone, welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm your host, David Fromm. With the national debt climbing higher and higher, the podcast wanted to see if it's possible to cut $2 trillion from federal spending. That idea sparked the series, Big Ideas for Smaller Government. Over the course of 12 episodes, we've explored practical ways to shrink the size of government. And now we're getting close to hitting that $2 trillion goal. Today, we're going to focus on the General Services Administration, or GSA. It was established in 1949 to streamline and centralize the federal government's administrative functions, particularly procurement, property management, and record keeping. Created during President Truman's administration, the GSA was created to bring efficiency and accountability to government operations following World War II. By consolidating several federal agencies, including the Public Buildings Administration and the National Archives, the GSA quickly became the federal government's chief logistical and support arm. Over the decades, the GSA's role has evolved to meet modern challenges, including the management of real estate assets, technology acquisition, and digital government services. So, let's see how they've been spending taxpayer money and what could be cut to save some of that money. I want to welcome back Jeremiah Mosteller, who's the Policy Director for Americans for Prosperity. Jeremiah, welcome back.
David, so excited to be here with you again. And I see that goal ahead of us, and I'm ready to run across that finish line soon.
I'm sure you are. And I know how much you love the GSA. So let's talk about the GSA's budget. What's it look like?
Yeah. Well, David, the General Services Administration is like the nerd's nerd of federal agencies. So this is exciting. It has a budget, though, that's pretty small. It's $61 billion. As you said, even though it manages a lot of office buildings and a lot of property and some other functions, it's definitely not as big as some of the other agencies, but still pretty substantial spending every single year. GSA, though, is divided into kind of 2 different components. One, you have 11 regional offices that cover all parts of this country that kind of manage the properties in those individual states and localities. But then you also have kind of 2 national components of the General Services Administration. The first is the Public Building Service, which does exactly what we've been talking about. It manages all of the owned and leased spaces that federal agencies rely on for offices, programs, and various other operations. And fun fact, the federal government actually owns about 359 million square feet of office space, and then leases about another 1.1 million square feet of space where it doesn't own space that agency needs, or it's not the type of space the agency might need. Sometimes they'll enter leases in privately owned buildings. And then the kind of second national component of the GSA is what is called the Federal Acquisition Service. And they help all other agencies across the federal government procure and manage their technology, vehicles, and other types of equipment, as well as manage some of the travel of other federal agency employees. So there's kind of a centralized process to allow that travel to be scheduled efficiently.
Cool. So under prior leadership, the GSA made some news because of an $800,000 bill. Can you remind us what that was about?
Yeah, David, if any of your listeners cared at all about politics, in recent decades, they will have heard of this. The General Services Administration under prior leadership got in some hot water, literally and figuratively, because they had an $800,000 bill for a conference they were hosting in Las Vegas. It included such fun things as $30,000 for a pool party, them hiring a mind reader as entertainment for their staff, and them having one of their employees stay in a 2,400 square foot suite in that Las Vegas hotel. And yes, I did say 2,400 square feet. That is 5 times the size of the place that I live every single day. And so that is a very big place to spend a few days for a conference. And so Congress caught wind of this. And so they were very, very upset. There were a lot of questions being asked about, well, why can't this conference be hosted in one of the thousands and thousands of buildings that you own and manage? GSA, why can't you stay in a more...
That's no Vegas trip. Come on. Or a penthouse.
That's right. Or stay in a more reasonable hotel, or find a more cost-effective way to spend taxpayer money. So members of Congress started asking a lot of questions, and let's just say things changed pretty quickly after that.
I hope so. So GSA has also had some issues redeveloping a former mental hospital into the Department of Homeland Security headquarters. What are the details of that project?
Yeah, David, this is kind of a perfect example of not only what the GSA does, but how it can do it ineffectively and inefficiently. So the GSA announced in 2007 that they were going to be taking what was called St. Mary's Hospital, which was a mental health hospital in Washington, D.C., and converting that into the new headquarters for the Department of Homeland Security. So that was announced in 2007. It wasn't until 6 years later that any Homeland Security employees moved into a building there on the campus. They have spent $3 billion so far, and the project continues, and there is not an end date in sight as of today. Mainly that cost, candidly, has been very, very high because there's a lot of historic buildings on the property. And so that takes a lot more time, effort, and money to either redevelop or remove those buildings. The biggest problem, though, is the Government Accountability Office has raised again and again to Congress that neither the Department of Homeland Security nor the General Services Administration has been willing to provide any type of estimated timeline or cost for the entire project. And the Government Accountability Office says, like, hey, Congress, you deserve that information because you continue to appropriate millions and billions of dollars to this project. Now, on the flip side, Congress definitely deserves some credit here too, because they have officially requested that and have not been given that. And so they continue to fund this project without clear accountability and oversight. And so they need to step in on this project and make sure they're getting what they're requesting.
Yeah, we seem to have a common theme from a policy standpoint this year of, like, how about we have Congress do their constitutional job? And to their credit, sometimes they have been moving in that direction, trying to do it. So hopefully that move can continue so that we don't waste more money. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that just makes taxpayers just like lose faith in government and just be like, what is going on here? So anyway, so moving to looking at cuts that could be made, GSA also deals with federal buildings. Is the federal government using all of those? Because that's a lot of square footage you talked about.
Yeah. Yeah. And David, to remind listeners of those numbers I said earlier, I did say 359 million square feet of owned space and then 1.1 million square feet of leased space. That is a lot of space. They are being used, but even when a building is occupied, of which there are many buildings that are not actually officially occupied by any agency or entity, only about 25% of the space in those buildings on average is actually being used by the agency once it is actually occupied. And the Government Services Administration, so the agency we're talking about today, they have raised that red flag. But each time they want to sell a building, they have to run through this entire long process to try and get rid of it. And so they've actually identified about 34 buildings, actually a number of which are in Washington, D.C., in the downtown area there, that they want to get rid of and that they want to sell. And so far, they've not been able to do that until things began to change a little bit recently. It's also worth noting for listeners that DOGE, the entity that President Trump created, itself identified about 418 leases that were sitting out there that were either not being used or were underutilized, and those employees across the country could work in another lease or work in another building. And so those have all been canceled now. But selling the buildings is something that's an ongoing process right now that GSA is working on, now that the Trump administration has stepped in to help streamline that process and really given them permission, candidly, to do their job.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine there's a bit of a microscope coming from Pennsylvania Avenue, because you got the real estate tycoon in chief. He probably feels like he can come in there and make some better decisions, which probably is right. Well, so at the end of the day, how much would it save taxpayers if we got rid of?
Yeah, so if we were able to sell the 34 buildings at a market rate price, of which should be able to happen, we're not facing a problem with buildings being too cheap in this country, as I think folks who are trying to buy a house will know. We could save $1.8 billion over the next 10 years. And that's just selling these 34. There's even more that can be identified. And the GSA is committed that once they are able to get rid of the process of disposing of these 34, they're going to continue to find additional ways to optimize the federal portfolio.
Yeah, it seems to me like this is an area where, private business really knows how to do this, how to be efficient. I mean, granted, there's plenty of companies that have waste, but they're very incentivized because they have a bottom line and they want to increase revenue to find efficiencies and do more with less. And government just doesn't have those same incentives unless Congress, and ultimately taxpayers are really clamoring for it and saying, hey, you got to be responsible with taxpayer money. So if we add these cuts to our total so far, what would our new total be? Yeah,
David. So that brings our total up to $1,999 billion. So we're close. And I promise listeners, this was not intentional. Did not want to leave them with a cliffhanger at the end of this episode. It's just sadly that we can't get that last additional billion from this particular proposal. But I think we're going to get there pretty soon.
I'm optimistic. That's fabulous. Thanks. All right. Well, Jeremiah, thanks so much as always. We can't wait to talk to you again.
Yeah, David, looking forward to it and looking forward to achieving our goal.
Well, hey, folks, if you like this episode and would like to stay connected with the podcast, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.